Hello. Yeah, it's good to be back again. It's been a while as usual. We love to bring cool stuff to you guys, and today we'll be continuing with the serverless and AWS Cloud series, which we've been working on for probably some weeks now. And the caption for today will be launching and managing a web application with CloudFormation. Whilst we've got a video on showing how to use CloudFormation templates to rapidly build and destroy or tear down VPC as to what your normal Terraform template will look like. Today we want to see how we can actually do the same, rapidly spin up, build an application, launch it and make it open, publicly accessible, then also tear that thing down pretty much fast as you build it. Okay, so a brief introduction. Actually, I've used this in the previous slide. CloudFormation gives a developer and system administrator an easy way to create and manage. Okay, that's the caption there. You're creating, you're managing, and a collection of related AWS resources, provisioning and updating them in a predictable manner. So for this task or for this recording, we will be using CloudFormation to provision and update web application. At first, we will create a simple S3 templates, and I'll show you what that looks like, and also another template with retention policy sets. Then that will be after deletion upon update, how that will be handling retention. Okay, then finally we will provision a PHP web application using AWS AMI, then change resources, add load balancer, and also add scaling group, and see how we can rapidly do all that just from a templates, Terraform templates, without hassle or stress. Okay, let's get right into business. Okay, I'm going to put this in the background because I think that's the last slide. There's one more. Okay, great. So I think I've already set this. Create the buckets, set retention policy, provision PHP, update and modify existing application, add IAM roles, usually roles to manage or control access. Add load balance and auto scaling group. So let's put this down in the background. I'm going to show you what my template looks like. Sorry enough, I'm working with Notepad++. I know y'all all get hit me up while not working with maybe VS Code or stuff like that. I'm on a different Windows server as compared to the other one where I've got my VS Code installed. Oh no, it's here, VS Studio. Probably, I don't know why I just choose to use Notepad. Okay, so we can see the first templates. This is the temp lab one, the YAML file. For this, we're provisioning basic S3 buckets. So we can see we're setting the buckets, resources, the type, we're using an S3 buckets. Okay, then the property currently access control is only read or public read only. There's no writes. Okay, then the output will give us a referencing the buckets for the website content, which you've actually spelled out here, which will be created. Then a basic description. So this is pretty easy. Now the second template, we have added a policy, retention policy, so we can see deletion policy retained. So upon deleting this buckets, part of it will be retained, which we can always fall back to maybe extract metadata or the artifacts. Okay, so it's basically the same, but it's just that whilst these we do not have any retention policy, here we do have a retention policy. Then the next one which you have here is for the web application. So we can see, quickly walking through this, we have defined environment variables here. We are going for dev and prod, okay, allowed values. Then the Linux AMI specification here, the type, we're going for AWS EC2, that image ID. Then the default is going to be in this path. Okay, great. Now the VPC ID will specify that which will be extracting from a VPC within AWS, this account. Then the subnet ID as well. Then all that will be string. Then we're doing a bit of mapping. Now we're mapping the prod to T2 small, then the dev to T2 micro. So you can see how we can be flexible in doing that mapping there and not restricting everything within one server space, but we can spin up 2 instances of these and clearly segment the prod from the dev environment. Then we also assigning resources. Now for these, the web server instance profile, we're just setting an instance profile IAM instance. Then we're setting the properties and the role, EC2 role. So it's going to extract all the permissions for the EC2 role, which we're actually creating here, which we'll be deploying. Then the web server security group, also setting security group, which will give us a list of allows. So currently we're only allowing port 80 for this. Now we also defined all IPs within the internet can access this on port 80. Obviously it's a web application, so you want it publicly accessible if you're sure you want to go that route. Okay, that's the whole essence of restricting access via this. Then we've got an endpoint. Now we're using the elastic IP, which means we'll have a dedicated IP. Then the instance ID will be referenced from this. Then also the web server hosts. Now the creation policy, resource signal, timeout, we're setting a bit of timeout there, PT 5 minutes. Then the type, again, this EC2 instance, a bit of metadata there. Then we leave a comment, installing the PHP application, just so we can follow the process to watch how that works. Then we set up CloudFormation init, initializing that's the configuration of the packages. We're using the yum here, so we're going for HTTPD and the PHP. Then the files, the var www index, HTML index, a PHP file, and we're writing the content, pretty much basic content in there. Okay, so then we're setting permission 644 read writes, read, I think, and the owner is Apache. Then also we're setting the etc configuration hooks, the D file, and in here auto reloader, trigger open post. Then we're setting the path resource, also initializing CloudFormation there. Now for this context, we're running as roots, so we can have the full-fledged permission, but again we're setting the mode 644 for the owner Apache and Apache here. Then also in the etc configuration.hub file, we're also doing a bit of stack ID, region ID, interval, then a permission. For this we only have the 4, which clearly specifies the read from the context of the permission. Then the owner is roots, the group is roots, also restricting access. Then the service, for the services, sysv init, HTTPD, we enable this, we ensure running through. Then configuration hub for the Apache, the PHP, we enable that as well, ensure it's running. Then we point to the files specific using the full path. Okay, be sure you're using the full path, if not you might end up getting errors. Then for the properties, we're seeing the image ID, we're referencing that AMI, which we've spelled from the scratch there up there. Then the instance type, now we're finding in map. Remember we did a bit of mapping here, so it's going to go look in the map. But we'll see this is for prod. It's going to set up within using the T2 small. If it's dev, using T2 micro. So going back there, we can see all that being set up here as defined clearly environment variable, index type of point zero association, public IP resource true. Remember we set the elastic IP. Then also the subnet ID extract from the VPC subnets. Then the group from the group as well. Then IAM profile from the profile which we set within the role. Then a bit of user data. Now you can see we're doing a bit of base 64 here, which is pretty much neat to just encode stuff. Obviously it's an encoding, not encryption. Okay, so we define clearly bin bash. Then we set a bit of automation here to just run this command upon the script execution. Then we will have that be doing in the off directory where we have the bin, the counter inits for the application, then running other stuff, setting the region, then also handling errors. Then finally we will have the resource name ready. Then it's going to throw that us the value which we can use to access this resource. So that was pretty lengthy. Now this is necessary for me to explain so you understand what we'll be doing, not just deploying this and going ahead and just having this stuff ready. Obviously it's best practice to do the explanation so you understand. So next in line, we can clearly see that we've got another one. Now for this we're doing a bit of auto scaling, I think, resource handling. So we can look at this, is basically almost the same thing as what we have here, not too far-fetched, except if I go in here, you can now see that we're having more VPC, the security group being created. Port 22 is also being opened up for admin management, so admin can actually SSH into the server and do maintenance and management right there, okay, off the bat. Now I wouldn't recommend something like this I would rather recommend, if you're doing this from your office network only, restrict the IP address, not pointing it open. But again, this is just for demo purpose. So the endpoints, again, EIP, it's basically the same as what we have from the other one. The only difference is just at that point. Then also everything else here is exactly what it is. It's just that we need to define extra here for the property tag, because we've added port 22, remember. So we need to also set that up. But again, apart from that, it's all the same. The only different one you have is the one for auto scaling. So auto scaling, we obviously need to pay attention to the fact that yes, we need to add more resource, right? So that's where you find us setting up a bit of head check threshold to trigger the auto scaling. Then we can now get on into the auto scaling section, then assigning the properties which we want to do, then the minimum size, maximum size, then going ahead and setting up the web server configuration to allow auto scaling. Great, which is also the only different path. The permission as for this is still the same. Then everything else here still the same, but we'll be having a new URL. Okay, great, just so we can enable to understand that auto scaling has been implemented. All right, so that will be the talk for these templates files. Next, we'll go in the lab session and hands-on and start deploying these templates, watching how that works, and then tearing them down once we're done with that session. See you in a bit. Okay, so right off the bat, let's get our hands pretty dirty. The first task is pretty much basic. It's just to create a new stock using CloudFormation, and we'll be doing a new resource. Then we'll be using template ready, or we can use a simple template, or even creating designer. Well, I'll go template ready. Now I do not have the file in an S3 bucket, but if I do, I can basically get it from there, or fetch it from there. I'll upload the templates, then I'll navigate to the path where I've got my file in my downloads folder. I've got where should be launch and manage an application. Okay, so is this lab 1? I'm just going to select that, then allow this stuff. Once it's done, it'll go the next thing. So we can see automatically it dumps that in an S3 bucket and gives us the S3 URL. Okay, so we can view in designer, which I'm not doing. I've got a video doing that already. So we'll give this stack a name. Now this is, I think, the only thing we have to set here. We'll just give it a name, call this lab 1, just for identification purpose. Okay, then no parameters. I'm just going to click next on this. Then we can do key value, that's for tagging. Again, permissions, we won't do permission here, but like I did mention, if we've got permissions or roles, we can actually do that stuff here going on. Then upon failure, it's going to roll back, and I think we're pretty much okay with that. We're going to go next and review. Then we can go ahead to create this stack. So once this is created, we will check in the S3 and we'll be seeing a bucket which has content of what we just put in from the upload. Okay, we'll wait for this and get back to you guys. Okay, our stack is ready. We can see creation completed right there. Now we can view resources here, just to maybe look around and see what we have going on there. We can see the S3 buckets and the physical ID. Also the bucket tag here. Great. We can also view outputs just to look at a few more stuff, giving us a key value, the bucket name, and also the bucket value. Now I'm going to go into my S3 buckets and refresh this. We will be seeing the buckets appearing here. Okay, so if I just click on this, more like to reload this stuff, we will have our buckets appearing right there. It takes a while, I think, to refresh that page. Then we should have the buckets. It's a bit stuck. Oh my god. Okay, so there goes our lab 1. Now we can see the access is public. Remember, we set public read access here, so that's why you can see that being flagged out here as public, which means public can read the content of this bucket. If we just click on this bucket, you can get in that bucket and maybe copy the bucket URL and just try to maybe see what it looks like. Okay, but currently it's going to take a while to actually upload the content, but I think the content should be in at this point. I'm just going to go back. Okay, but there you have it, lab 1. That's the name we gave it, and that's the bucket, and it's publicly accessible. We'll go into the next, which will be us setting up a BW detention policy or retention policy here to retain even upon deletion. Then we'll see how this takes effect when we delete the buckets. All right, so let's go back to our CloudFormation templates. Then I will be deleting this particular one to bring in the second one. So I'll click on this, I'll delete this. If I delete this, automatically it deletes the S3 resource which was created. Remember, I've talked about that as well. So be sure you want to delete and be sure you're clicking on the right thing so you don't end up deleting all the things you have in your environment. We'll wait for this to finish, then we'll go to the second challenge or the second part of the task. Okay, so deletion is done. Now this retention policy, what we're trying to do here is simply saying at AWS, if we delete the CloudFormation templates, do not delete the buckets, retain the buckets. That's what this retention policy is being enforced as here. Everything is still default. You still have public read access, but we're retaining the bucket even if we delete the CloudFormation templates. So let's see how that takes effect. I'm going to again follow the process. I hope this goes pretty fast. We'll upload what we have, navigate to there, double click on it, then wait for this to finish, then we'll just go to the next thing, give it a name and get done with this. Okay, so it's done. An S3 bucket is created. We will go next on this. We'll give it a name, lab 2. Okay, we'll click next on this and review everything which we have. No key value, I'm not setting anything there. Then we review this and we go ahead to create this stack. So once it's done, I'll get back to you guys. Okay, so our bucket is ready. We'll go back to our S3 tab and we're just going to refresh this and we should have the bucket appearing right there. Lab 2, there you have it. So we're quickly going to demonstrate the retention policy. I'll go back in here and I will try to delete this bucket, this stack, sorry, just so we see if the bucket will be retained. That's the whole idea of setting a retention policy anyways. So let's delete this and then wait for this to be done deleting, then we'll go check the buckets. Okay, so our stack is gone. Now I'm going to the S3 buckets. If I refresh this, just so we're sure, we can still see the bucket is retained. Right now, why would you want to do this? Maybe in the bucket you've got a number of useful resources that have been put in by people and you want to probably point that to another web application or something. You just don't want to delete the template and delete everything in it. Obviously you want to set retention policy so you can, that can help you enforce retaining the bucket upon deleting the stack. Okay, so I'm just going to delete this anyways because we don't have no use for it at the moment. All right, so I'm just going to copy that bucket name and paste that right there and get this thing deleted. So let's move on to the third part of this, which will be us now moving on to building the application, the web application, which we've shown you from the templates. So we will be deploying this rapidly and seeing how we can get a link to access this publicly, then making all the changes on the fly from the templates and updating. Rather, we'll not be deploying a new one. We can just be updating that template to keep watching what we're doing. So let's see how this stuff works. Okay, so again, quick review on this. We can see we're setting up the dev and stage, dev and prod, sorry. Then for the VPC ID, we will be supplying this because we have created a VPC which we'll be using. So you can see the VPC public subnet ID, the public subnet availability zone, and also the ID of the VPC. We'll be supplying those values right in here as required to meet the specification. So let's go ahead with the creating of the task. Again, we're going with resources standard. Now we're going to be using a template ready to work with this, or we can use a sample template. Remember, maybe we should do that just to showcase. So just in case I select a sample template, we can see we've got the options to choose from any of the LAMP stack, which is already there, Linux, Apache, and the other PHP and other stuffs in there. We can just something from Active Directory, but again, we'll just go with what we've been doing. We don't have any S3 bucket hosting this resource, so we're just going to upload this from our developer system. So select that, wait for this to do its magic, doing all the checking stuff and getting that stuff uploaded. Then we'll go ahead and set a bit. So you can see a bucket is created right off the bat with that in there. Then we go next. So we'll give this a stack name. We'll call this maybe web application, or maybe just lab 3 for the third lab. Okay, now we will be setting, remember, now we can see parameters because these had been clearly defined within here environment. So we'll be setting stuffs here. So very necessary to have defined that within the template file. So we can say we're going with dev. We could go with prod, but let's go with dev for this, and that's the Linux MI ID selected there. Now for the VPC ID and the VPC subnet ID, like I told you, we will extract them from this given VPC ID first. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go paste that right here. Then for the VPC subnet ID, again, I have it right here. So I'm going to copy this and just paste that right here. Okay, you can leverage off any VPC which you have within your environment. That's basically what we're doing here. So we'll click next on this, be sure everything is okay. Then we'll just, for the configuration, we're not setting any IAM role yet for this lab. So we'll just ignore that, no key value matching. Again, we want the default behavior to be rolled back to the best states before crash. Then we'll just click next on this, review the final stage of this. Then we can go ahead and create this stack. So let's create this stack and allow it to do its magic. It's going to take a while because it's going to build a couple of stuff. So I'll come back to you guys when it's ready. Okay, it seems like our stack creation is done and it's ready. Off the bat, if I go in here, we can see we've got T2 micro, which we had specified in that file right there. Yeah, for dev T2 micro. So you can see the EC2 instance is up and running. The initialization check is still on. Let's try to see if we can maybe leverage on this. I'll go to output and copy the URL. We've got that elastic IP, remember we had specified, so we can have a fixed or static IP. Right, I'll paste this here and see if we can access the resource. Okay, not secure, we know we're doing HTTP. Okay, great. So this is running, up and running, and we can access the resource. That's a good sign. Now let's assume this application starts receiving lots of traffic hits, and yeah, T2 micro seem to be too small to do a good job for us, so we need to maybe scale. Now you could scale horizontal, or you could scale vertical. In this context, we want to see if we can maybe move from what we have as T2 micro to T2 small, which is much better in terms of resource, which we'll call a prod. So right off the bat, we do not need to start going about trying to stress ourselves like from scratch again to maybe build another infrastructure that will be able to do that. We can leverage on CloudFormation and just update what we already have. So what we're going to do right here is we will select that lab tree, then we can click on updates. So what we'll do is we'll be updating. Say great, at this point we'll be use the current templates which we have, and we'll locate that template, which is this. Now you see right here I've got dev. All the bat I can change this to prod, because in my template I have defined the flexibility for that to happen. Okay, that's the uniqueness of this. So I can change this to prod, verify everything else stays okay, then I can just click next on this. Once I'm done validating this, again everything else here stays the same. I'm not changing the IAM role, I'm using existing role. Then I'll click next on this. So I'm going to review this. Once it's done reviewing, I can go ahead and, sorry about that, my back. Okay, once it's done reviewing, I can go ahead and just update this stack. So I can update this stack. It's going to run its thing and do all the updates without me having to bother about the hassle. Then again, when it's ready, we'll check the link again and see if we can still reach it on the same IP. Okay, so the update is ready and it's done. That's how pretty fast it is. We'll go back and grab this URL and try to visit the same URL and see if we can access the resource. Okay, it takes a bit. But once again, yes, we can access the resource. Now, the third thing which we'll be doing, or the next thing we'll be doing, would be to assume an instance whereby now we've seen how to scale by adding, maybe switching to another resource in terms of the instance from T2 micro to T2 small. What if we want to maybe scale by adding more resources? There's a requirement for admin to manage this application, not from the console here, but from maybe a terminal like SSH or something. So we can see right here off the bat, the lab 4, we are doing that, taking care of that. We're adding resources to this to be able to allow flexibility for management. Everything else will stay the same apart from the changing, adding that extra resource. Then be sure that we're specifying that resources within our properties. And that's all that changes. So what we'll do is, again, we do not have to build from scratch, like I did mention. We can update this thing right off the bat. Again, use we can replace the current template in this context because we won't be using the same templates. So we will upload, if we have from an S3 bucket, we can, but obviously we have on our developer system. So we'll just go right there, select this, and we will work with the new template. Now what we're doing is everything else will not change except for the fact that we are only using a new template which have new definitions in there, right? That's the whole idea. The template file takes care of all the definition. So we go next, verify the same parameters we have. We want to stay within the prod zone. That's fine. Remember, we've moved from dev to prod. Then again, right here, we can go next on this. VPC ID is okay. If we want to add maybe a new IAM role, we can actually do that by changing, but we want to stick with existing. Then leave all the default configuration. Then we'll just go next and rapidly deploy this thing by updating the stack. So once this is done, we will see how that change takes effect by testing, maybe trying to SSH into the box. Remember, if you look right here off the bat, I'm just going to open that up. We had specified all IPs should be able to hit that thing on port 22. So we will try that using our normal Ubuntu system to see if we can access it. Then if we do, it means our updates ran successfully and we're good to go. Okay, so we can see that the update is done. Again, we have the same URL. We'll try to visit this application. We'll see what had changed. So we can see this is an updated version. This wasn't in the initial version, but this is now a new version. Doing a bit of version control there. We have been able to rapidly change stuff in terms of resources. So for allowing access via SSH, we can configure something like keys, not just username and password to handle that. But I think we won't be doing that. We'll go over to the next challenge, which will be us to maybe create an auto scaling group within the same application to help us handle scaling without us burdening. Let's say we're receiving a particular amount of hits. If I go in that file, configuration file quickly, we will see that we've done a bit of fine-grained flexibility here to define, apart from everything else remaining the same. If I go all the way here, great, we can see the health check being clearly specified there. So basically, healthy threshold 3, unhealthy threshold 5, interval 30 seconds, timeout 5. Now this will help us manage auto scaling. Then also we've specified clearly, very vividly, we can see right here the minimum maximum size. Okay, then we will be using these to simulate what an auto scaling group will look like. Again, everything else stays the same, nothing pretty much have changed. Okay, so let's pretty much get this deployed and see how this is going to take effect. I'll go back to my CloudFormation templates and walk through the process again. Okay, let's run quickly and see if we can get this done. So I'm going to update this. A few things has changed, replacing the using a new one, which is our new file. We'll go upload that file, lab 5. Then just while that is loading, let me show you a few stuff here which had actually changed. We're changing the resource name type. Then also we're specifying, okay, it's done. Just give me some time. I'm trying to beat the 30 minutes window. Okay, next on this, now you would see we need to add one more thing here. So we've created a subnet. So we'll have an auto scaling group within that subnet. So we'll have to go copy the subnet ID. We're specifying E2 US West 2A. I'm going to copy that. Then for the availability zone, we have an availability zone now. So we'll have multiple instances within the availability zone just for auto scaling. Okay, great. We're good to go. Everything else stays default. We're using prod again. We'll just click next on this, and I won't change the role, but like I told you, we can actually change this role if we want to. Okay, but I'll leave everything else as default and follow the flow, and then get this thing done with. Review this quickly and update the stack. Okay, so something unique which I didn't point out, we can see it's taking out the web server hosts. Now it's going to bring in or create a web server group, which I was trying to show you there was actually specified in here. So auto scaling group. So we're going web server group, no more web server hosts, which is what we had before. So we can have groups of these instances for auto scaling. Okay, very important. This might still take a while. We'll wait for this. When it's completely done, I'll come back to you guys and we'll just show you proof. Okay, so it's done. Now the first proof I want to show you, if I go to resource, let me refresh this, we will see something unique happening there. Now you can clearly see we've got the ELB right there, Elastic Load Balancer, and it's created for these actually resource. We've got the web server config. Also we've got the web server group, very unique. Then also the group security group for the group. Again, these were not clearly spelled out in the initial ones, but since we're using auto scaling now, there has to be a load balancer clearly defined to manage how that scaling happens. Okay, again, we'll go over to the output. We will copy the new URL, which is completely different from the other one. Just again as a proof of concept, we'll paste that here and go to the URL. So let's see. Now we have a highly available or high availability, as well as load balancing happening in the background, which is quite different. Now another check, if I go in my instances and refresh this page, we will see what we're talking about here actually clearly shown. So we see we terminated this one. Now that happened pretty fast that we won't even notice it. Now we've got these two running, so we're clearly having that availability zone thing happening there to help us manage traffic as we start receiving lots of hits for our web server. And also in case one is down, it automatically routes all requests to the other one without hassle. Okay, this is where I'm going to call a shot. It's been fun. I know it's pretty long, 32 minutes or 33, but thank you for hanging with me, and I'll be seeing you in the next recording. Please turn on the notification button, like the content, and have a good day. Yeah, bye.